The courtroom froze the moment Judge Judy lifted a thin, cream-colored envelope, its seal already cracked, its contents trembling between her fingers. The woman at the defendant's table leaned forward, still smug, still certain she'd win. "Before we proceed," Judge Judy said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, "before we continue, there's something you need to know about your partner." The woman smiled. Right before the truth shattered her world. He isn't just married. He's married twice. You won't believe this case, but before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe for more shocking courtroom moments. The courtroom buzzed like a live wire, murmurs ricocheting off the polished walls, but the woman at the defendant's table remained an island of confidence. Her smirk stretched across her face as if she already owned the room, her posture a casual arrogance that dared anyone to challenge her. She leaned back, legs crossed, tapping a manicured fingernail against her coffee cup. Around her, cameras whirred softly, capturing every calculated expression. Judge Judy's gaze, sharp as a scalpel, cut through the haze of self-assuredness. The thin, cream-colored envelope rested on her bench, its contents quivering slightly, waiting to deliver a truth that would topple egos. She didn't reach for it yet, letting the tension coalesce, letting every smirk, every whispered comment hang in midair. "You've been very thorough in your preparation," Judge Judy began, her tone measured but unyielding. "But thoroughness does not always equate to honesty." Her eyes flicked toward the defendant, piercing through the facade. The smirk faltered, a tiny twitch betraying the first hint of unease. The plaintiff, seated across the aisle, folded her hands tightly in her lap. Her jaw clenched, eyes narrowing at the display of cocky superiority, but her anger was tempered by anticipation. She had come prepared for deceit, for lies masked in charm, but this brazen confidence, was something she hadn't expected. Judge Judy's hand hovered above the envelope, the subtle weight of paper, the faint creases, all whispered of secrets too potent to ignore. "Before we proceed," she said, her voice slicing through the courtroom's charged air, "there's something you need to know about your partner." The defendant's smile didn't falter entirely, though a shadow flickered across it. "Go on," she said, voice light but edged with caution. Judge Judy didn't answer immediately. She allowed the room to feel the silence, to strain against the invisible cord of suspense that tied everyone to that envelope. Every eye was drawn to her bench, every pulse quickened, every heartbeat echoed. Then finally, the gavel tapped lightly, not as a command but as a signal, an exclamation that the narrative was about to pivot. The defendant leaned forward instinctively, drawn by the promise of revelation, unaware that her confidence was about to shatter. "This," Judge Judy said, lifting the envelope, "contains information that changes everything you thought you knew. And it's not just about finances, not just about deception. It's about trust." The defendant's hand twitched toward her mouth, a feeble attempt to maintain composure. The plaintiff's eyes widened, hope and vindication mixing in a fragile, volatile cocktail. The courtroom held its collective breath, the cameras fixed, the silence now deafening. And then, as Judge Judy's fingers teased the envelope open, the first crack in the defendant's carefully constructed world appeared. Her smirk faltered entirely, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, a tremor of fear. The room leaned in, as if gravity itself was pulling them toward the revelation that hung just above the polished surface of the bench. The smirk wouldn't last. Not for long. The courtroom door creaked open, and every head turned. Marcus stepped in, a man who once carried confidence like a coat, but now looked like he had left it in another room. His shoes scuffed the floor lightly, as if apologizing for the very act of entering. Sweaty palms clenched the edges of his briefcase, and his eyes darted nervously across the room, lingering on the defendant's face for reassurance that wasn't coming. The defendant straightened instantly, a flicker of panic betraying the calm she had clung to moments before. Marcus smiled too quickly, an unnatural curve that failed to convince anyone, least of all Judge Judy. Every step he took toward the stand seemed measured, but measured in fear rather than purpose. Judge Judy's eyes never left him. "Marcus," she said, her voice calm yet razor-sharp, "please state your relationship to both women before us today. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. Well, I've known them both. In a personal capacity, he said, choosing words that felt flimsy even to him. The plaintiff's hands tightened around the armrests. Personal capacity? She echoed, her voice low and dangerous. You mean you've been living a lie, haven't you? Defensive sparks lit the defendant's expression. She leaned in, her voice smooth but sharp. Let's not exaggerate. Marcus and I were together. That's all. Judge Judy raised a finger, slicing the tension. Mr. Marcus, are you telling this court that you've maintained two separate lives without either party's knowledge? Marcus faltered, caught in the motion of a lie he had rehearsed too many times to count. It's complicated, he said, his voice cracking under the weight of simplicity and untruth. Complicated? Judge Judy's gaze sharpened. Complicated doesn't cover marriage licenses, financial entanglements, and hotel records you've conveniently neglected to mention. Complicated is missing a bus stop. This is a deliberate web of deception. The camera lingered on Marcus's face, each bead of sweat a drumbeat of guilt. He glanced at the plaintiff, whose eyes burned with a mix of fear and righteous fury, then at the defendant, whose smirk was gone, replaced by a rigid, taut expression that screamed betrayal. The courtroom murmured, sensing the first cracks in Marcus's carefully constructed facade. Judge Judy's voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper, but every word carried the weight of a hammer. And yet you expect this court to trust a word you say? Marcus hesitated, then mumbled something incoherent, his attempt to justify the lies falling apart under the scrutiny of truth. The defendant's hands clenched the edge of the table. She realized the game had shifted. She wasn't the only one at risk now. Judge Judy's gaze swept the room, landing on every face, making sure the gravity of the moment sank in. We'll begin with finances, she said, signaling the clerk, because truth, as you'll soon see, leaves no room for pretense. Marcus's knees shifted under the stand, the weight of the coming revelation pressing him into the chair. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on him, every breath held, as the first pieces of his double life were about to be exposed. The smirk was gone, replaced with dread, and Marcus was the next domino to fall. Marcus shifted on the witness stand, the leather creaking beneath him as if echoing the tension coiling around the room. His hands fidgeted with the edge of the chair, betraying the calm he tried so desperately to project. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on him. The plaintiff's sharp gaze burned with anger. The defendant's expression was a mask of forced composure, and Judge Judy's eyes cut like glass, dissecting every twitch, every stammer, every lie hiding behind his words. Complicated? Judge Judy repeated, her voice cold and precise. You call overlapping financial accounts, secret hotels, and unfiled divorces complicated? Marcus opened his mouth, swallowed, and tried to speak, but the words came out uneven, awkward. I mean, we were basically over, at times, he said, a feeble attempt to shift blame onto the plaintiff, to make it sound mutual, casual, inconsequential. The plaintiff's jaw tightened. Basically over? She snapped. You call hiding a life from me basically over? You were living a full life, Marcus, without me knowing. You weren't over, you were deceiving. The defendant leaned forward, her confidence unraveling. It's not like that. You knew what he told me? He said everything was resolved. Her voice quivered, a fragile defense against the crumbling illusion that Marcus had built around both their lives. Judge Judy's gaze never wavered. Marcus, I have documents, messages, and a timeline, and each contradicts the narrative you just fed this court. When did you think this would hold up under scrutiny? Marcus swallowed again. Beads of sweat formed along his temple. I thought I could manage it, he stammered. You didn't, what? Judge Judy interrupted, her finger pointing toward him like a spotlight exposing a flaw. You didn't think anyone would check? You didn't think your lies would catch up? The camera lingered on his face as he froze, realizing he had no credible answer. Each woman's expressions shifted, the plaintiff's eyes burned with the need for justice, the defendant's smirk vanished entirely, replaced by pale panic, and somewhere beneath all that, the weight of betrayal settled like a stone in the chest. Judge Judy leaned back, letting the courtroom absorb the tension. "Let's move to specifics," she said, signaling the clerk. "Dates, finances, phone records, every inconsistency will be addressed. Because in this courtroom, Mr. Marcus, paper trails do not lie." Marcus' eyes darted nervously as the clerk handed over the first set of records. He glanced at the documents, the dates, the accounts, and realized, with a sinking sense of inevitability, that every carefully constructed lie was about to collapse. The defendant's hands trembled on the table as she whispered under her breath, almost to herself, "This can't be happening." Judge Judy's voice cut through. "Marcus, start from the beginning. No omissions, no evasions. Your story will be heard in full and the truth will emerge." Marcus exhaled shakily. He was no longer in control. The courtroom's gaze, the rising tension, the accumulating evidence, all pointed toward a reckoning he couldn't avoid. The first domino had tipped, and Marcus was standing on the edge of a revelation that would unravel everything he thought he could hide. The smirk, the confidence, the casual arrogance, it was gone, and the lies, all of them, were about to be exposed. The courtroom seemed to exhale a collective hush as Judge Judy reached for the first stack of papers. The thin rustle of documents sliding across the polished bench echoed like whispers, each page a small hammer striking at Marcus's fragile facade. The camera lingered on the defendant, her face paling as she instinctively leaned forward, realizing the smirk she had worn with such confidence was now a distant memory. Judge Judy tapped the top sheet lightly with her gavel. "Let's begin with the basics," she said, voice calm but carrying the weight of inevitability. "Marriage license number 1. Your name, Marcus. Your spouse, the plaintiff." Marcus's throat tightened. He swallowed, his gaze flitting nervously between the document and Judge Judy's unwavering stare. Yes. That's correct," he mumbled. The plaintiff leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "See? That's exactly what I've been saying. He never filed a divorce. He's been lying this entire time." The defendant's composure cracked further. "Wait, that can't be. He told me." Her voice faltered, an almost childlike tremor betraying the panic simmering beneath her vanity. Judge Judy let the silence stretch, letting every eye in the room digest the weight of the document. "Mr. Marcus," she said finally, "you are legally married to the plaintiff. Is that accurate?" "Yes," he whispered, almost inaudible. "Yet," Judge Judy continued, tapping another paper on the bench, "you've presented yourself as single in your dealings with the defendant. Financial accounts, lease agreements, insurance forms, all indicate you were independent, unencumbered. How do you reconcile that?" Marcus's hands clenched the edges of the stand. I don't know." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "You don't know, or you've been carefully calculating how long you could maintain this illusion." The courtroom shifted, leaning into the tension. The plaintiff's chest rose and fell rapidly. The defendant's trembling hands hovered over her coffee cup, attempting, futilely, to anchor herself. Marcus's narrative was unspooling, strand by strand. Judge Judy lifted a second envelope, slipping it from beneath the first. Her voice dropped slightly, the silence sharpening her words like a scalpel. "There's another license here, filed in another state, another woman, and neither of you," she said, her gaze sweeping across the plaintiff and defendant. "Is that woman?" The defendant's chair screeched as she scrambled upright. Her lips parted, but no words emerged. Only the raw shock of betrayal. The plaintiff blinked, disbelief etched across her face. Another marriage?" Marcus's hands shook, the tremor betraying his attempt to stay composed. I can explain." Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice slicing through the room like a gavel strike. "No explanations yet, because the facts are now plain. You're not just deceiving one person, Marcus. You're living multiple lives under false pretenses, and the evidence proves it." The camera cut to the gallery. Whispers surged like wind through dry leaves. Every audience member sensed the enormity of the revelation. The defendant's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by an unguarded, visceral fear. Judge Judy lifted the first document once more, her fingers resting lightly atop the paper. Paper trails do not lie, Mr. Marcus, and it's only a matter of time before every single one of your lies is laid bare. Are you prepared for that? Marcus exhaled shakily, realizing that no charm, no smirk, no flimsy excuse could shield him now. The first domino had fallen, but the avalanche was only beginning. The room held its breath, waiting for the next strike, the next revelation that would unravel the tangled web of deceit Marcus had spun. The courtroom seemed to tilt on its axis. The envelope in Judge Judy's hands had shifted more than paper. It had shifted reality. The defendant's chair scraped sharply against the floor as she bolted upright, her perfectly manicured hands clenching the edge of the table. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, lips parted in disbelief. "Another marriage," she whispered, the words barely audible, as if speaking louder would make it untrue. The plaintiff's eyes narrowed, disbelief giving way to vindication. Her fingers drummed on the armrest with a quiet intensity, a pulse of controlled rage. She had always suspected deceit, but nothing had prepared her for this. A second license, another legal tie Marcus had hidden, another layer of betrayal she hadn't even imagined. Marcus's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The words he had rehearsed 100 times dissolved into a slurry of excuses, weak and tremulous. I can explain," he stammered, voice cracking under the weight of exposure. Judge Judy leaned forward, elbows resting on the bench, her gaze unflinching. "Explain, Mr. Marcus? You've presented yourself as single to one woman, committed to another, and apparently legally married to a third. Someone neither of these women knows. How exactly do you plan to reconcile that?" Marcus shook his head frantically. I didn't mean... Didn't mean? Judge Judy's voice was tight, precise. Deception isn't a mistake, it's intentional. And intentional lies have consequences. The courtroom's energy thickened, almost tangible. Cameras whirred, catching every twitch, every involuntary blink, every falter in composure. The defendant's hands were pressed flat against the table, knuckles white. The plaintiff leaned forward, her anger tempered by the thrill of truth finally emerging. The tension was so thick it felt like a storm about to break. Judge Judy slid the second envelope across the bench. "These documents prove it. Another marriage license, in another state. Another woman. Marcus, your double life is now on the record, fully. And the court, and everyone present, will see exactly how you've manipulated the truth." The defendant's knees weakened, and she sank slightly in her chair. Her smirk, her confidence, her casual arrogance, they all dissolved in the harsh light of exposure. She muttered, almost to herself, "I can't believe this. I didn't know." The plaintiff's chest rose and fell rapidly, eyes blazing with a mixture of rage and relief. "Finally," she whispered. "Finally, someone sees the truth." Marcus sat frozen, realizing that the fortress of lies he had spent months building was crumbling. Every word he'd carefully crafted, every deception, every half-truth, all of it was being laid bare, piece by piece, for the world to see. Judge Judy's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs of the audience. "Let this be a lesson. No matter how cleverly you try to hide your actions, paper trails, dates, and truth will always surface. And when they do, arrogance collapses under reality." The camera lingered on Marcus, trapped between panic and shame, as the courtroom absorbed the shockwave of the revelation. Every smirk, every confident glance, every lie he had told, it was gone. The avalanche had begun. The courtroom settled into an uneasy silence, but then it was broken by the deliberate click of heels against polished tile. Heads turned as a poised, confident woman entered, clutching a manila folder to her chest. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, resting on Marcus for only a heartbeat before meeting Judge Judy's piercing gaze. The defendant's jaw tightened, confusion flickering across her face. The plaintiff's eyes widened, recognition sparking as though she had just glimpsed a shadow from Marcus's hidden life. Who is that?" she whispered under her breath. Judge Judy didn't answer immediately. She let the room feel the weight of the moment, letting suspense coil like a spring before snapping. "Please identify yourself," she said finally. The woman stepped forward. "My name is Vanessa," she said clearly, voice steady despite the tension. "I am Marcus's second wife. We were married legally nearly a year ago." The courtroom gasped as if a physical wind had swept through. The defendant clutched the table edge, panic spreading across her features. Her carefully maintained poise crumbled under the force of this revelation. "Second wife?" the plaintiff repeated, barely able to breathe. There's another one?" Vanessa lifted her folder and opened it with deliberate calm. "Yes, and I have records, bank statements, communication logs, emails, proving that Marcus has been hiding significant financial transactions from both of you. Money, properties, and personal accounts have all been secretly managed to benefit only himself." Marcus froze, a cold sweat breaking across his forehead. I can explain." Judge Judy's sharp look cut through him. "Explain what, Marcus? That you've maintained 3 lives simultaneously? That you've lied to every single person in this courtroom? Because so far, your explanations have been nothing but smoke and mirrors." Vanessa laid a series of documents on the bench. The camera lingered on the papers, overlapping rent checks, hotel reservations, credit card charges in multiple names. Each line was a breadcrumb, revealing the full extent of Marcus's deceit. The defendant leaned forward, trembling. I had no idea," she stammered, voice cracking. He told me the divorce was final. I didn't know." The plaintiff's expression hardened. "Neither did I. But now it's all here. All of it." Judge Judy's gaze swept the room. "Marcus, these aren't just mistakes. These are deliberate, repeated actions, deceptions designed to manipulate and control, and they affect 3 women, 3 lives. What do you have to say for yourself?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. The courtroom waited, the tension coiling like a spring ready to release. Every pair of eyes followed him, every breath held in anticipation. Vanessa looked at the plaintiff and defendant in turn. "I trusted him," she said softly. "And I didn't even know about the rest of this. We all deserve answers. And we all deserve accountability." The camera lingered on Marcus, whose hands trembled, whose smirk had been replaced by sheer, raw panic. The first cracks in his carefully constructed world had become gaping fissures. Judge Judy tapped her gavel lightly. "And now, Mr. Marcus, you will answer for every hidden account, every lie, and every deception. The truth will not be denied, not in this courtroom, not today." The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next revelation, the next domino to fall. The avalanche of truth had begun, and Marcus was standing directly in its path. Judge Judy's gaze swept the courtroom like a laser, cutting through the fog of disbelief that clung to every corner. Marcus sat frozen, his shoulders slumped, hands twitching, as if the very act of moving might shatter him further. The documents Vanessa had laid out glimmered under the overhead lights, a tapestry of lies meticulously stitched over months, now unraveling thread by thread. "You've created a pattern, Marcus," Judge Judy began, voice tight, precise, and dangerous. "A pattern of manipulation, deceit, and betrayal that affects every woman in this room. And yet, until now, you had the audacity to present yourself as a victim of circumstance." Marcus's voice trembled. I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" Judge Judy repeated, each word a scalpel cutting through the illusion. "You knowingly lied about marriages, finances, living arrangements. You created entire narratives to deceive 3 separate women. That is not accident. That is deliberate." The defendant's hands gripped the table, knuckles white. Her smirk had completely vanished, replaced by raw fear. She whispered, I thought I was special. He told me everything was over." The plaintiff leaned forward, her anger simmering beneath a brittle veneer of control. "Special? Special? I trusted him too. All this time, all the money, all the plans. He was lying to me as well. And now this?" Vanessa, the second wife, held her folder tightly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glimmered with hurt. "I trusted him too," she said softly. "He promised me the truth. He never mentioned you two. I didn't even know these lies existed. And I'm not the only one who's been manipulated. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed on Marcus, forcing him to meet her gaze. Do you see now, Mr. Marcus, how your carefully constructed web of deception has entangled and hurt 3 lives? How each thread you pulled has tightened around your own neck? Marcus swallowed hard, the weight of his actions crashing down like a tidal wave. I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to hurt anyone. The courtroom laughed, not mockingly, but with the sharp disbelief of betrayal. Judge Judy's gaze bore into him, unyielding. You didn't want to hurt anyone, yet here we are, 3 women betrayed, 3 lives upended, and you still cling to excuses. Words don't undo actions, Marcus. Only accountability does. The defendant finally spoke, her voice quivering. What? What happens now? How can this even be fixed? Judge Judy's lips pressed into a firm line. First, we uncover every deception, every financial misstep. Then we assign responsibility. And finally, we let truth prevail. Marcus, you will answer for every manipulated account, every hidden transaction, every lie. No one in this courtroom will be spared the consequences of your actions. Not even you. The camera lingered on Marcus's face, sweat glistening, eyes wide, panic blooming like wildfire. Every web he had spun was now illuminated under the harsh courtroom lights. Every thread of deception pulled tighter with each revealed fact, each whispered truth. And the avalanche had only just begun. The courtroom had settled into a tense, expectant quiet, every eye fixed on Judge Judy's hands as she held the next folder. It was heavier than it should have been, a subtle weight that carried more than paper. It carried revelation. The camera lingered on Marcus, whose fingers twitched nervously at the edge of the stand. He had weathered accusations, exposure, and shame, but he had no idea this was coming. Judge Judy's voice cut through the charged silence, deliberate and sharp. Mr. Marcus, you've told this court many things, but there is one document you did not anticipate being found. She placed the folder on the bench and flipped it open. The document was unassuming at first glance, a plain employment record, but as Judge Judy began to read aloud, the implications crashed into the courtroom like thunder. Dates, declarations, financial claims. Marcus had listed himself as single, no dependents, contradicting every other claim he had made to both women. He had lied to his employer, to insurance companies, and to the financial institutions controlling the very accounts he used to manipulate all 3 lives. Marcus's eyes widened, sweat glistening along his hairline. His hands flew to cover his face, then fell limply to his knees. The defendant's voice wavered, trembling as she whispered, He used that too? The plaintiff's gaze sharpened, fury mixing with vindication. Every payment, every account, it all makes sense now. He wasn't just cheating emotionally, he was orchestrating it financially. Vanessa, Marcus's second wife, leaned forward, her brow furrowed. I knew something was off with his accounts, but this... She shook her head. He was controlling everything, our lives, our money, our choices, and we didn't even see it. Judge Judy's eyes bore into Marcus. This employment file proves that your deceit wasn't spontaneous, Mr. Marcus. It was deliberate, calculated. Every lie, every hidden account, every falsified document was designed to maintain your control, and now it is undeniable. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came. His entire persona, confidence, charm, arrogance, had been stripped away in the span of a few minutes. The courtroom could feel it, the calm before the storm, the tension just short of explosion. Judge Judy tapped the folder lightly, the sound like a metronome counting down the inevitability of his exposure. This file links your lies to financial gain, Mr. Marcus. It exposes your intent, she said, voice low and cutting. Changes everything. The camera panned over the courtroom. The defendant's hands trembled on the table. The plaintiff clenched her fists, breathing unevenly. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line of anger and resolve. And Marcus was trapped, fully exposed, every layer of deception illuminated. Judge Judy leaned back, letting the weight of the revelation sink into the room. Mr. Marcus, she said finally, there's someone else we need to hear from. Someone you never wanted in this courtroom. A shiver ran through the audience. Marcus's eyes widened in horror. Every heartbeat echoed the coming confrontation. The avalanche of truth was accelerating, and nothing he had done could slow it now. The courtroom waited, every breath held, as the next domino, the next revelation, prepared to fall. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Every whisper faded, every movement stilled as the door at the far end creaked open. A figure stepped inside, hesitant but determined, her eyes scanning the room with a mixture of fear and resolve. She clutched a manila folder, fingers tight around its edges, as if it were a lifeline. Marcus's face drained of color. His panic was immediate, his usual bravado stripped bare. The defendant's eyes widened, confusion mixing with fear, while the plaintiff leaned forward, sensing the arrival of someone who might finally tip the balance of truth. Judge Judy's gaze sharpened. "Please state your name and your role in this matter," she commanded, her voice calm but uncompromising. The young woman inhaled deeply. "My name is Lily," she said, voice steady but low. "I was Marcus's personal assistant for the past 18 months. The courtroom murmured softly. Marcus's shoulders stiffened, his fingers clenching the edge of the stand. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There were no rehearsed words, no flimsy excuses to offer here. Judge Judy's eyes bore into him. "Ms. Lily, you have evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lily replied, stepping closer. She opened her folder with careful precision, laying out a series of documents and emails. These show that Marcus has been deliberately misleading both the plaintiff and the defendant. Financial transactions, overlapping accounts, correspondence, he orchestrated it all to maintain multiple lives without either of them knowing. The plaintiff's eyes widened as she leaned forward, fury and vindication mingling in her gaze. "I knew something was off. I just didn't realize this level of deceit." The defendant's hands shook against the table. All this time, all the money, all the gifts, it was all lies? Vanessa, Marcus's second wife, crossed her arms, staring at him with a mixture of outrage and disbelief. "He promised me the truth. He never mentioned you two. And now, I see everything." Judge Judy tapped a finger on the bench. "Mr. Marcus, this is your opportunity to account for the full scope of your actions. Every manipulation, every hidden account, every lie, all of it is documented and presented here. The court and everyone in it will not tolerate omission." Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. His world, carefully constructed with charm and deception, had been ripped apart by the appearance of someone who had witnessed it all firsthand. Lily continued, her voice unwavering. "These documents link his financial manipulations directly to his own gain, Your Honor. He misrepresented his status, hid income, and created a complex web designed to confuse and control. And it all led back to him." Judge Judy's gaze swept the room. "So, Marcus, the question remains. Do you take responsibility for these actions, or will the court proceed without your cooperation?" Marcus's eyes flicked between the three women, between the evidence, between Judge Judy herself. For the first time, he realized there were no more shadows to hide in, no more smirks, no more excuses. The avalanche of truth pressed down on him, relentless, unavoidable, and absolute. The courtroom waited, electric with tension, as Marcus braced for the consequences he could no longer escape. Judge Judy tapped the gavel lightly, each strike echoing through the courtroom like the beat of a drum signaling an impending storm. Marcus shifted nervously in his chair, glancing at the stacks of documents that Lily had laid across the bench. Each page was a breadcrumb, a thread leading directly back to a labyrinth of deception Marcus had spun with meticulous precision. "Mr. Marcus," Judge Judy began, voice low but cutting, "this court has before it records of transactions, bank statements, credit accounts, and leases. Your actions are not merely emotional betrayals, they are calculated financial manipulations. Explain to the court why the plaintiff's funds were transferred to accounts in the name of the second wife, and why the defendant's money was used to cover overlapping rent." Marcus swallowed hard, eyes darting nervously. I didn't, it was all supposed to be temporary, just adjustments." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. Adjustments, she repeated. Temporary? Mr. Marcus, these adjustments span months, even years. Multiple accounts, multiple states, multiple women. Temporary is not the word. Fraud is. The plaintiff's eyes blazed as she leaned forward, voice trembling with anger. He siphoned my savings, my investments, my trust, all to support a life I didn't even know existed. The defendant shook, gripping the edge of the table. And I contributed unknowingly. I thought we were building a future together. Vanessa, Marcus's second wife, folded her arms, fury radiating. And all this time I was told we were building a life together. Yet my funds were being tangled with theirs. He's been using all of us. Judge Judy's gaze swept the room, holding them all in place, before returning to Marcus. Do you understand, Mr. Marcus, that these documents prove intent, pattern, and premeditation? This isn't oversight. This isn't mistake. This is a labyrinth you built to control and manipulate. Marcus's hands trembled as he shifted the papers in front of him, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I just didn't want to hurt anyone. Judge Judy's voice sharpened, slicing through the courtroom's tension. Not wanting to hurt anyone doesn't erase the impact of your actions. You have misled, stolen, and deceived. Your manipulation was both emotional and financial, and every record before this court ties directly to you. The camera panned slowly over the courtroom, lingering on the faces of the three women. The plaintiff's jaw was tight with controlled rage. The defendant's hands shook visibly as she realized the scope of her unknowing complicity. Vanessa's gaze was icy, resolute, yet tinged with betrayal. Judge Judy leaned forward, the gavel poised but silent. Now, Mr. Marcus, we will lay out every transaction, every misused account, and every financial deception, and the court will determine the restitution required to repair the lives you've tangled in your web. Marcus exhaled shakily, realizing that no lie, no charm, no half-truth could protect him now. Every financial thread had been exposed, every manipulation laid bare, and the labyrinth he thought only he understood was fully visible to the world. The courtroom held its collective breath, the tension like a live wire. Marcus was cornered, the avalanche of accountability accelerating, and the next revelation promised to be even more devastating. The lights in the courtroom dimmed slightly, and a projector flickered to life, casting a web of dates, texts, emails, and transactions across the wall. Each line, each connection, pulsed under the glare of the projector like a map of betrayal. Marcus's jaw tightened, sweat glistening along his hairline as the sprawling timeline revealed the magnitude of his deception. Judge Judy's voice cut through the low hum of whispered shock. Mr. Marcus, what you see here is not conjecture. It is evidence, meticulously compiled. Every lie, every omission, every manipulated account is laid bare for this court, and for everyone you have deceived. The defendant's hands shook, pressing against the table as she traced the lines of the timeline with wide eyes. I had no idea, she murmured, voice trembling. The smirk that had once been her shield was gone, replaced by raw vulnerability. The plaintiff's eyes burned, fists clenched in quiet fury. I trusted him, she whispered, her voice low but steady, and he used that trust to lie, to manipulate, to steal from me. Vanessa, Marcus's second wife, crossed her arms, staring at the chaotic threads sprawled across the wall. I've seen glimpses of this, but never all at once. Seeing it mapped like this, it's horrifying. He built an entire life on lies. Judge Judy stepped closer to the projector, pointing at the lines that connected emails to bank transfers, vacations to overlapping anniversaries, credit cards to hidden purchases. Notice the pattern, everyone, she said, voice tight with authority. These are not isolated mistakes. These are deliberate manipulations. Each thread connects back to Marcus, and each thread represents a life affected, a trust betrayed. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between the women, the timeline, and Judge Judy. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words could capture the weight of exposure pressing down on him. The camera panned slowly over the timeline, a hotel reservation overlapping a supposed single weekend. a bank transfer coinciding with a joint dinner, a text message that contradicted an earlier claim. The narrative he had spun was collapsing in real time, every thread pulled taut under scrutiny. Judge Judy's voice softened slightly, but the gravity of her words held the courtroom in thrall. "Do you see now, Mr. Marcus? Each deception, each lie, each manipulated fact, these are not accidents. They are intentional, calculated, and fully documented, and as of this moment, they are undeniable." The defendant's eyes filled with tears, the plaintiff's chest heaved with a mix of rage and vindication, and Vanessa's jaw tightened with resolve. Every one of Marcus's carefully constructed facades had fallen. Judge Judy paused, letting the silence settle over the room like a heavy blanket. Then her voice cut through again, sharper this time. "And yet, there is more. Someone else knows the truth. Someone you never intended to face. Marcus, are you ready to meet the next witness?" Marcus's eyes widened in terror. The timeline of lies had already destroyed him, but he realized in that instant that the avalanche of truth was far from over. The courtroom leaned in collectively, breaths held as the next domino prepared to fall, promising revelations that would fracture the last remnants of his control. The courtroom seemed to shrink around the three women and Marcus, the air thick with tension so palpable it felt like a physical weight pressing down on every chest. The projector had been dimmed, but the evidence it had displayed lingered in the minds of everyone present. Dates, transactions, texts, all intertwining to form an undeniable portrait of betrayal. Judge Judy's eyes swept across the room, landing on each woman in turn, then on Marcus. "This court has seen the evidence," she began, voice calm but heavy with authority. "But evidence alone does not convey the full impact of actions, words, documents. They are inert, people feel consequences, and today that impact will be confronted." The plaintiff rose first, her voice sharp, trembling, a mixture of pain and controlled fury. "Marcus, you took my trust and turned it into a weapon. My savings, my time, my emotional energy, you used it all to serve your lies. Do you even understand what that feels like?" Marcus flinched, his hands gripping the edge of the stand. I didn't mean—" Judge Judy cut him off, her tone slicing through his defenses. "Intent doesn't erase the harm. Excuses do not absolve accountability." The defendant's voice shook as she spoke next. I thought I was in love, that we were building something real. But everything was built on lies, every gift, every promise. It meant nothing, didn't it?" Vanessa, the second wife, stepped forward, holding the folder tightly, her voice low but unwavering. "I trusted him completely, and while I thought we were building a life together, I was just another piece in his game. How could he manipulate all of us so completely?" Marcus's lips trembled, but no words came. His arrogance, his charm, his smirking confidence, everything he had relied upon to protect himself, was gone. He was raw, exposed, vulnerable, and powerless. Judge Judy's gaze bore into him, steady and unflinching. "Mr. Marcus, each of these women has spoken truth, and each truth cuts deeper than any document ever could. You must confront the consequences of your actions, not just legally, but morally. Every person you have deceived carries a burden now. You will not leave this room without acknowledging it." The women's emotions intertwined: anger, betrayal, grief, and even the smallest thread of cautious relief. They spoke in overlapping whispers and raw confessions, the courtroom echoing with the human weight of Marcus's deceit. Marcus finally exhaled, a shaky, uneven breath. I am sorry. I see now what I've done," he admitted, voice cracking under pressure. "I didn't realize. I should have been honest." Judge Judy leaned forward, voice softening slightly, yet carrying an unyielding authority. "Seeing is not enough. Responsibility is action, and you will face the consequences of every manipulation, every hidden account, every lie. Your reckoning is not over. It has only begun." The camera lingered on Marcus's slumped shoulders, a man stripped bare of illusions, while the women exhaled, some in sorrow, some in controlled rage, all marked by the profound weight of truth. The avalanche of justice had begun its descent, and there would be no turning back. The courtroom felt heavier than ever, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus sat slumped, sweat dampening his collar, his face a mixture of panic and disbelief. Every revelation, every accusation, every document had stripped him bare, leaving only a man confronting the full weight of his actions. Judge Judy leaned forward, resting her elbows on the bench, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "Mr. Marcus," she said, voice precise, "you have been exposed. Your manipulations, your deceit, your deliberate obfuscation, it's all here. But now the question is not just about consequences, it's about choice. What kind of person will you become after today?" Marcus's lips trembled. I don't know if I can. I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "A mistake is spilling coffee. This," she gestured to the mountain of evidence, the shattered trust of 3 women, the labyrinth of lies. "This is manipulation. Deliberate, calculated. And now you have a decision. Will you accept responsibility fully, or cling to excuses and let others bear the weight of your actions?" The plaintiff, standing now, clenched her fists, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "He lied to me, betrayed me, used me, and I want restitution, not just money, but acknowledgement, accountability, something that shows he understands the harm he's caused." The defendant shook, her voice fragile yet defiant. "And I was manipulated too. I need to know he sees it, that he knows the damage he's done." Vanessa, Marcus's second wife, crossed her arms, her expression icy but resolved. "And I trusted him completely. He owes me honesty, not excuses, not apologies that hide the truth. He needs to confront what he's done." Marcus swallowed, his hands trembling as he gripped the edges of the stand. The weight of the courtroom, the combined grief and anger of 3 women, and Judge Judy's unwavering stare pressed down on him like gravity. He had no escape, no charm left to manipulate, no smirk to hide behind. I understand," he admitted, voice cracking, raw and vulnerable. I accept responsibility. I see what I've done. The harm I've caused. I will make this right, as much as I can." Judge Judy's gaze softened slightly, but her authority never wavered. "Acknowledgement is the first step, Mr. Marcus, but responsibility is action. You will face restitution for your deceit, you will account for every financial misstep, and you will ensure transparency moving forward. This courtroom does not simply punish, it seeks resolution, accountability, and moral reckoning." The camera lingered on Marcus's defeated posture, shoulders heavy, eyes wide and haunted, while the 3 women exhaled, some in relief, some in anger, some in cautious hope. The moral crossroad had been reached, one path toward integrity and accountability, another toward continued denial. Judge Judy leaned back, her voice echoing in the hushed room. "The choices you make now define not only your consequences, but the kind of person you will become. Choose wisely, Mr. Marcus. Truth has a way of catching up, and morality will not wait." For the first time, Marcus understood fully. The avalanche of accountability had begun, and there was no turning back. The gavel struck once, resonating through the courtroom like a pulse that demanded attention. Silence followed, a heavy, charged stillness that seemed to press down on every person present. Judge Judy's eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Marcus before sweeping to the 3 women. The weight of truth, accountability, and consequence filled the space, unrelenting. "Mr. Marcus," Judge Judy began, voice firm, controlled, yet carrying the resonance of moral authority, "this court has seen the full extent of your deception. Multiple marriages, financial manipulation, emotional betrayals, and deliberate falsehoods spanning months and even years. The evidence is irrefutable, and the harm undeniable." Marcus swallowed hard, his hands trembling, his usual posture of arrogance replaced by the rigid slump of a man confronting total exposure. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand," he muttered, barely audible. Judge Judy's gaze hardened. The court finds that restitution is required to account for the losses incurred by all parties. Mr. Marcus will repay the plaintiff and the second wife in full for financial damages, including misused accounts, duplicated expenses, and lost funds due to deceit. Additionally, the defendant will receive formal acknowledgement of the deception she unknowingly enabled, alongside counseling provisions to mitigate emotional harm. The courtroom absorbed the verdict like a shockwave. The plaintiff's chest rose and fell in a controlled exhale, her eyes shimmering with relief, rage, and vindication all at once. The defendant slumped slightly, the tension in her shoulders releasing slowly, as the acknowledgement felt like a balm against the betrayal she had suffered. Vanessa's eyes burned with quiet resolve. Her financial damages were acknowledged, but her emotional scars were still visible. Judge Judy's gaze returned to Marcus, piercing, unyielding. "And let this be clear, Mr. Marcus. Deception has consequences. Arrogance has limits. Manipulation cannot shield itself from truth. Today, the court not only enforces restitution, but delivers moral clarity. Your actions will not be ignored or forgotten." Marcus exhaled shakily, finally meeting the gaze of the women he had wronged. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of cameras, capturing the finality of the moment. He had no smirk to hide behind, no charm left to manipulate the narrative. The avalanche of accountability had crushed the illusions he had relied on for so long. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, voice softening but still carrying authority. "This courtroom is adjourned. But remember, the consequences of one's choices follow long after the gavel falls. Integrity, honesty, and accountability are the only shields against ruin. Let today be a reminder to all present. Truth always emerges, and justice, though measured, is relentless." The camera lingered on Marcus's defeated form, shoulders bowed, hands trembling, and eyes wide with recognition of his total loss. Across the room, the women exhaled, a mixture of relief, sorrow, and quiet triumph etching their faces. As the gavel struck one final time, the courtroom emptied, leaving behind a lingering echo of morality enforced, lessons learned, and consequences fully realized. Arrogance always collapses under truth, but what would you have done in her place? The avalanche had finally run its course. The courtroom had emptied, yet the echoes of gavel strikes and whispered truths lingered in the polished wood and high ceilings. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long golden streaks across the benches, light soft, warm, and almost forgiving after the storm of exposure and confrontation. The plaintiff lingered near the front, her hands folded, eyes distant but steady. Relief and exhaustion danced across her face. She had faced betrayal and deceit, yet the weight of vindication now pressed gently against her chest. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave her body in measured bursts, each breath a small reclaiming of control. The defendant remained seated, shoulders slumped but slightly unburdened. She had entered the courtroom with arrogance, fully confident in her sway over the narrative, but left humbled, chastened. Her eyes caught those of the plaintiff, a fleeting, silent acknowledgement passing between them, a shared recognition that both had been manipulated, yet both had survived. Vanessa, Marcus's second wife, clutched her folder loosely, a symbol of hard-earned clarity and accountability. Her jaw was set, eyes reflecting determination and quiet fury, but there was also a subtle sense of relief. The truth finally seen, the lies finally exposed, and the opportunity to rebuild what had been broken. Marcus remained at the center, head bowed, shoulders heavy with the realization of the full scope of his actions. The gavel's echo still reverberated in his ears, a reminder that every lie had consequences, every deception had weight, and every choice led inexorably to accountability. No charm, no excuses, no manipulations could erase the truth that had now been etched permanently into the record. Judge Judy stepped forward, gaze sweeping the empty courtroom one last time. "Arrogance collapses under truth," she said, voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had seen countless stories of deception, but none quite like this. Power is temporary. Manipulation leaves scars not just on those deceived, but on the deceiver. Integrity is the only shield against the consequences of dishonesty. She paused, letting the words sink into the still air. This courtroom does not exist merely to punish, it exists to illuminate truth, enforce accountability, and remind us all that every choice carries weight. Let today serve as a testament. Lies may build walls, but truth always finds a way through. The camera lingered on the three women as they exited, each carrying a mix of sorrow, relief, and strength. Their eyes met briefly, sharing unspoken acknowledgement of endurance, justice, and survival. Outside, sunlight bathed the steps of the courthouse, a metaphor for clarity and hope after the storm of betrayal. Marcus remained a solitary figure, dwarfed by the courtroom's silence and the weight of his exposed actions. Every line of deceit, every manipulation, every hidden account had led here, and he could not escape the consequences now. As the courthouse doors closed behind the last of the women, Judge Judy's voice echoed in reflection. Arrogance always collapses under truth, and those who hide behind lies will eventually face daylight. The story had run its course. The lies had been uncovered, justice served, and the lessons of integrity and accountability etched indelibly into the minds of all who had witnessed it.